Thanks for joining me today for another episode of A White Woman in Distress. This podcast is about raising awareness for missing kids, teens, and adults. My goal is to help spread the word and find those who are missing. We need to come together as a community to help find these people. We need to stop ignoring what we see and start looking out for each other. I understand that you want to stay safe, but it's important to speak up when you notice something's wrong. If someone you loved was missing, you would want people to help. People who think, well, this could never happen to me. You really need to understand that it can happen to anyone. Every single day, children, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, etc., they all go missing. You don't have to put yourself at risk. You can always call in tips anonymously, and then if they ask your name, just tell them that you want to remain anonymous. Our goal should ultimately be to bring everyone home safely because that's what we would want if our loved one was missing. Everyone deserves to know what happened, and families deserve closure. This content may discuss violence, sexual assault, and murder, which may be distressing to some. Listener discretion is also advised. So today, we're going to be diving into the complex case of Jeannie Bryant, who vanished on December 19th, 1949, from Mauston, Wisconsin. I may be mispronouncing that, but just bear with me, okay? She was only 4 years old at the time of her disappearance. Jeannie's case remains a massive mystery filled with conflicting accounts and enduring questions, leaving her family and a community searching for answers decades later. Let's explore the details of this case and discuss the possibilities, shall we? On December 19th, 1949, Jeannie's parents, Opal and Raymond, were away at work, so then they left her with her siblings in the care of their grandparents, Helen and Casper. What started as a typical day took a mysteriously tragic turn when a fire broke out at the Bryant's farmhouse. The exact causes of the fire actually remain unknown, as there's no documents to support that it was investigated by the fire marshal. The lack of documentation has led to decades of speculation and even the ongoing investigation. Jeannie's 5-year-old brother, Forrest, recounted, quote, "They were standing outside watching the fire when a woman in an expensive-looking car approached. The woman instructed him to seek out help at a house that was down the street, bypassing a closer residence. When he returned, both Jeannie and the woman were gone," end quote. However, this account was contradicted by the grandmother Helen, who actually claimed that she had taken the two children, Forrest and Elizabeth, outside when the fire had started. She then returned to the house to search for her granddaughter and kept calling her name, but never found any trace of her. But she had taken Forrest, who was 5, and then the younger sister Elizabeth, who was only 18 months, out first. Like, I understand taking the 18-month-old outside, but why wouldn't she get the 5-year-old Forrest to walk out while she grabbed Jeannie? That way she could have had all 3 kids outside together at the same time and she wouldn't have had to leave anyone behind. Something's definitely weird about that situation. How do you decide who to save and who to leave? But to me, it seemed like the grandma had favorites, but what do I know? Most authorities at the time concluded that Jeannie had perished in the fire. Some bone fragments were discovered, and they were sent off for analysis, but they couldn't be identified as her remains. The bones were later determined not to match her DNA. And they never really talk about what it was, like if it was human DNA or if it was just animal bones. But despite this, the belief that Jeannie died in the fire persisted for many, many years. The family even refused to talk about her after the incident. Jeannie's grandfather, Casper, had to actually be rescued from a second-story window due to him being disabled, adding another layer of complexity to the day's events. Jeannie's siblings are and were haunted by the doubts and unanswered questions. They even began to consider the possibility that their sister might have even survived. They speculated that she might have been taken by other family members or someone else. Maybe she was conceived out of wedlock, with the fire being set as a diversion. This theory, while lacking concrete evidence, provided a plausible explanation for the inconsistencies in the accounts of that day. Personally, I feel like the grandma might have been a part in this, and she never wanted anybody to know. She definitely had some part, considering that she tried to contradict Forrest's story when he told the police officers, and even after decades, he stuck to the same exact story. I don't know about you, but I know young kids have no filter and will definitely tell the truth, no matter the consequences. Plus, why would he even make up the part about the woman telling him to go to a house farther away? If he would have made it up, wouldn't he have just gone to the closest house? I mean, the house was on fire, right? I don't know. What do y'all think? The neighbor that Forrest got and came back to his grandparents' house, Irene Carlson, later said that the grandmother told her to stop looking because Ricky wasn't there. She was with relatives, so she might as well just go home. Most police officers believed that Ricky had died in the fire. Those bone fragments that they found, since they didn't match her DNA, they didn't really have anything to show where her body went or to where she was. Her siblings believed that she was alive and conceived out of wedlock, and that the fire was just a diversion because she didn't want the family to find out, which would make it easy to just pick her up without anybody noticing. Her siblings wanted the case reopened in hopes of finding their sister. Over 50 years later, they were demanding answers. All the original documents, however, were destroyed in a flood in the early 2000s. Now, the children would say later on that they noticed Helen, their grandma, was covering up for Opal, their mother, and everything she was doing. They also stated that Opal would just randomly vanish and visit the Midwest. She wouldn't tell anybody where she was going, but then she would just pop back up and never really talk about it. Opal and Raymond ended up divorcing, and then they moved on. Opal eventually married Ralph, and Raymond eventually married Susan. And from what information is available on the internet, they all seem to just carry on. Sharon, who was at school at the time of the fire, said that a cousin had sent a postcard addressed to their Washington address while also being sent to her sister, Ricky, who had supposedly died in the fire. She also thought it was weird that her mom had left with a shirt and a pair of overalls that belonged to Jeannie, and that she went to the Midwest, but when she returned, she didn't have those items anymore. Liz believed that she had to be somewhere in that region and that the clothes could be key to finding her. Jeannie's siblings believed that the fire might have been set deliberately, just to mask a planned abduction by a relative. Or, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm wondering if they just sold her. Like, maybe she was born out of wedlock, but then they met somebody that wanted a child and then just sold her so she could be raised somewhere else. The siblings suggested that Jeannie could have possibly been taken to live with her biological father or just another relative, hidden away to avoid the stigma associated with her birth circumstances. Maybe the family didn't want their reputation to suffer if the truth came out about their child's real father, but honestly, it makes sense. Like, back in that day, that was kind of a thing you didn't want anybody to know if you were not your actual parent's child, because then it would tarnish the family's name and stuff. But whatever, it really shouldn't matter about that. This theory, while it was lacking concrete evidence, it provided a plausible explanation for the inconsistencies within the stories of that day. The investigation into her disappearance was reopened thanks to her siblings, who continued to make her case known and to make sure that she was never forgotten about. In 2006, a Minnesota woman who believed that she might be Jeannie had her DNA tested against the Bryant family's DNA. Unfortunately, she didn't match any of their DNA or have any percentages related to them. But the renewed attention on the case underscored the enduring mystery and the family's unwavering hope for answers. Despite this passage of time, the search for Jeannie and where she could be still continues. Her case remains unsolved, which this is just a reminder of the unresolved tragedies that can haunt a family for generations. Each possibility carries its own weight of sorrow and uncertainty. But I'm going to talk about the timeline of events, and then we're going to continue on. So, December 19th, 1949, the day of the disappearance. That morning, her parents leave and go to work, but then they leave her and her two other siblings in the care of their grandparents. Now, Sharon is actually at school. She was 7 years old. So she was also, I guess, under the care of the grandparents, technically. But there were only 3 children in the home: Elizabeth, Forrest, and Jeannie. So midday, a fire breaks out at the Bryant household. Her grandmother takes the children outside and then searches the house for Jeannie, calling out to her without success. That afternoon, her brother reports that a woman in an expensive-looking car instructed him to get help from a house down the road. Upon his return, they were both gone. That evening, authorities concluded that Jeannie likely died in that house fire, although bone fragments that were found weren't hers. In the early 1950s, authorities conducted searches and investigations but found no conclusive evidence about her fate. The case is eventually classified as a probable death due to fire. Between the 1950s and the 2000s, the case remained cold, with occasional leads and tips that didn't yield any definitive results. Now, in the 2000s, they renewed interest and they opened the investigation again. So in 2006, at the request of her siblings, authorities reopened the investigation, and then a woman from Minnesota undergoes DNA testing to determine if she is Jeannie, but she's not. From 2006 to present day, the case remains open, and investigators and Jeannie's family continue to search for answers. While the timeline is helpful, there's still a lot of different theories that have emerged over the years, which there were 4 different possibilities, and we're going to go into that right now. So the first one was that she died in the fire, which is the most widely accepted theory. However, the lack of definitive evidence, such as positively identified remains and or finding her body or anything, leaves this conclusion uncertain. The second option is that she was abducted by this unidentified woman. The account given by her brother suggests that she may have been taken by a woman in an expensive-looking car. This theory raises questions about the woman's identity, her motives, and why she directed Forrest to seek help from a distant house, and not the one that was closer. The third theory is the family involvement and concealment. Jeannie's siblings have speculated that she might not have been killed in the fire, but she might have been taken by other family members and raised elsewhere. This theory poses that the fire was just a diversion, allowing Jeannie to be removed from the scene and hidden away to avoid social stigma. And the fourth option is that she was living under a different identity. There is always that possibility that she did survive the fire and she was raised by a totally different family under a different identity. This theory is supported by occasional reports of women who believe that they might be Jeannie, although DNA tests have thus far not confirmed any matches. The unresolved nature of Jeannie's disappearance has had profound and lasting impact on her family. The lingering uncertainty and lack of closure have haunted her siblings for decades. Their persistent efforts to uncover the truth reflect a deep desire for answers and a need to honor Jeannie's memory. Jeannie's parents, who are now deceased, live the remainder of their lives without knowing what happened to their daughter. For her siblings, the hope that Jeannie might still be alive provides a measure of comfort, even as it prolongs the agony of not knowing her fate. Advancements in DNA testing have played a crucial role in the ongoing investigation. While the 2006 test did not yield the hoped-for results, the ability of DNA technology provides a valuable tool for identifying potential matches and ruling out false leads. The possibility of using geological DNA databases to trace potential relatives of Jeannie offer a new avenue for investigation. The media and the community have played essential roles in keeping Jeannie's case in the public eye. News reports, social media posts, and true crime podcasts have all contributed to raising awareness and generating new leads. Public interest in cold cases, fueled by popularity of true crime media, has helped to bring attention to long-forgotten cases like Jeannie's. This increased visibility can lead to new information and potential breakthroughs, highlighting the importance of community involvement in solving cold cases. The disappearance of Jeannie Bryant remains one of Mauston's most perplexing mysteries. The fire that consumed the home left a trail of unanswered questions and unfulfilled hopes. Despite the passage of more than 70 years, her family continues to search for the truth, driven by love and a desire for closure. As we conclude today's episode, we honor the memory of Jeannie Bryant and the timeless effort of her family to uncover the truth. The quest for answers continues. Fueled by advancements in technology, renewed public interest, and the unwavering determination of those who loved her. Stay tuned for more episodes of A White Woman in Distress, where we will continue to explore the stories of the missing and seek to bring attention to those cases. If you have any information about Jeannie's disappearance, please contact the correct authorities. Every tip could bring us one step closer to solving this enduring mystery. And remember, if you see something, say something and do something. And as always, until next time, stay safe and vigilant.